Hello, welcome to the session entitled Cooperation is Key, the Auditor's Approach to Addressing Portland's Homelessness Crisis. I'm Jennifer McGuirk. I'm the Multnomah County Auditor, and I use she, her pronouns. I'll do a brief introduction of my office and then turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Portland Auditor Simone Rede. We'll ask each other some questions about audits that we are working on or have released related to the Joint Office of Homeless Services, talk about how we work together, and also talk about ways you may be able to use audit information. The Multnomah County Auditor is elected on a countywide basis as described in the county charter. My office includes 10 staff auditors, a hotline director, an ombudsperson, and a constituent relations DEI engagement specialist. I took office in 2019 following a competitive race and started my second term this January. This is my second and last term because Multnomah County has term limits. My office and Auditor Rede's office authority to audit the Joint Office of Homeless Services comes from the charters for our jurisdictions, which direct us to conduct audits, among other things. Also, there is an intergovernmental agreement between Multnomah County and the City of Portland regarding the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and that gives us each audit authority for the Joint Office. And now I'll turn it over to Auditor Rede.
Thank you. My name is Simone Rede, and I'm the elected auditor of the City of Portland. And like the county auditor, the city auditor is elected citywide and reports directly to the public. The office is nonpartisan, and as city auditor, I serve as the chief audit executive of our audit organization, which we call Audit Services. I took office in January 2023, also following a competitive race, and I've been in the role for less than a year. My office is responsible for a lot more than performance audits, though performance audits are definitely one of our key duties and are what attracted me to this role. In addition to audit services, my office also oversees city archives, the ombudsman, operations management, which houses our council clerk function, and that function administers council business and maintains the city charter and code. City elections are also part of the auditor's office. They oversee the city's elections processes and enforce campaign finance regulations. And like the county auditor's office, my office also runs the city's fraud hotline that takes tips from employees and the public about fraud, waste, or abusive position. Our office also has its own legal counsel, which is separate from the city attorney's office. And we're one of maybe a dozen audit organizations with employees that are represented by a labor union. All in all, my office consists of 41 employees with a budget of about $10.3 million this fiscal year. I want to talk a little bit about the unique role of auditors in local government. We are the check on policies and practices, and we provide independent oversight by questioning whether public resources are being used efficiently and effectively, as well as equitably to meet people's needs. Through objective analysis, we draw conclusions about government performance, and we identify ways to serve people better. And by reporting our results publicly, we make government actions more transparent and invite stakeholders to help us hold public leaders accountable. As Auditor McGuirk mentioned, we're going to be talking about audits related to the Joint Office of Homeless Services. And our audits don't necessarily tell you whether governments are using the right strategies or how much they should invest to address our homelessness crisis, but they will offer insights into the structures and systems, as well as delivery of services and how they can be improved. I want to ask Jennifer about, or Auditor McGuirk, about the recent audit that was released on the Joint Office in August. Can you tell us a little bit about the focus of your audit?
Sure, I really appreciated how you described our focus on systems, because I think, in every audit, we're looking at what is happening in the system, what's going on the ground, and how does that compare to what should be, legal framework, stated policies. And as you know, we're really trying to figure out what is causing what we're seeing, what conditions are happening. So the focus of the audit that came out last month about communication and contract management evolved because of our initial work looking at conditions. In 2021, my office reported to the public about an issue that we'd found at the joint office where they'd been reporting data about individuals who were enrolled in permanent housing programs as the date the people were entered into housing. And those aren't necessarily the same thing. You could be in a housing program, but not yet in housing. We began this audit to really look at the reliability of the joint office's data. And initially we were talking to homeless service providers about data concerns, ability to get data inputted and that sort of thing. And they really wanted to talk about concerns they had about siloing between the different systems of homeless services, communication from the joint office, contract management issues, and strategic planning. And so we expanded our audit to look at those issues.
And what methods are you using to gather evidence for your audit?
In this case, we looked at guidance from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and other federal agencies about criteria and responsibilities that counties and other jurisdictions have. We looked at the history of homeless services in Multnomah County and the city of Portland, and we looked at joint office budget documents and performance measures. We interviewed more than a dozen homeless providers in the spring of 2022. And then based on things that came out of that, we sent a survey to all of the homeless service providers working with the joint office in the fall of 2022. And we conducted follow-up interviews with providers earlier this year to see if things had changed or how they had changed. We also sent a survey to joint office staff and interviewed probably about close to 40 joint office staff during the course of the audit. So it was a combination of qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis to make sure we had sufficient and appropriate evidence for our findings.
And what did your audit find?
Many things, largely focused on issues around communication and contract management on the part of the joint office. And we found that there's 5 systems that people receive services through, and a person could receive services through more than one of these. There's this system for providing services to adults, unaccompanied youth, families, domestic and sexual violence survivors, and veterans. And those systems each worked in silos, partly because of the history of how they were created. We found that providers were frustrated with a lack of timely and complete contracts, often being asked to start work before their contract was executed. And there also then on the other side was difficulty in getting paid on time by the joint office. We found that program specialists and program specialist seniors who are supposed to hold providers accountable for meeting performance measures could adjust those performance measures. Sometimes there's a really good reason to do that. During the pandemic, of course, there were reasons why you would need to adjust those, but there wasn't clear criteria that everybody could see and understand about when to change those performance measures. And we found that the joint office needed to do a better job of communicating its strategic vision. Not all staff were aware of it. Not all providers were aware of it. And we also found that providers were submitting equity plans to the joint office to help address the fact that people of color, particularly Black individuals, are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. And providers were submitting those, but the joint office wasn't reviewing them. So we made recommendations to address each of these findings. And to their credit, the joint office agreed with the majority of our findings and recommendations. So that to me says they acknowledge that these problems have happened, and they've indicated they're already working to address many of them.
Could you speak a little bit to the way that auditors in your office have coordinated with auditors in the city auditor's office?
Yes, I really appreciate that you and I keep in close contact to keep each other informed about work we're doing to hold the joint office accountable and report on that to the public. I think even before my team started this audit, we were in communication with your office about audits related to the joint office that we were considering. The team for the audit I just talked about met regularly with auditors in your office to talk about the scopes of their work, share information, and they also conducted interviews of at least some providers together to save time on the part of the providers, so they weren't meeting with different groups of auditors repeatedly, and really just to make sure we were able to capture the stories that they needed to share. So as I just alluded to, Auditor Rede, your office has also been conducting an audit of the joint office. Can you talk about the focus of that audit?
Sure. So the focus of our audit is on the joint office's shelter services. The objective for this audit is to determine whether the joint office assesses performance of the shelter system, whether it evaluates for racial disparities and other outcomes, and uses that information to adjust programs. We're specifically looking to answer 3 questions with this audit. 1, are shelters easy to access and accommodate the needs of diverse users? 2, do people exiting the shelter system find safe and appropriate housing? And 3, are joint office programs designed to eliminate racial disparities?
Those are great questions. I really look forward to reading what you find out. What kinds of methods are you using to get at those objectives?
So to meet our objective, the city audit team has conducted interviews with staff and stakeholders, including providers. They've analyzed data from the Homeless Management Information System. They've reviewed provider reports, and they've also gathered user feedback through a survey that we got help conducting from the Street Roots ambassadors. The team really wanted to get the perspective of people who do and don't engage with shelter to gain a better understanding of the barriers that they face, issues they have with accessing shelter, availability of different types of shelter, and just to generally hear their user experiences. We knew that it would be fairly easy to get perspectives from people who were already in the system by tabling at the shelters and administering the survey there. But we needed a little bit more expertise to reach people who had never engaged in shelter or maybe no longer were part of the system. So our team learned through our work observing the point in time count. We reached out to folks at Portland State University for suggestions on how to reach that unengaged population. And they recommended that we work with Street Roots ambassadors. And we ended up developing a contract that allowed us to get their help refining survey questions, extending our reach to that unengaged population, and to get their advice on how to share results from the survey in a very respectful and trauma-informed way with people who are experiencing homelessness.
I really appreciate that, bringing in people impacted. I think that's something that I know both of our offices are really committed to, and I think is an important piece of doing auditing that really informs the public about what's going on. How did your team coordinate with my office?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. It's still ongoing. I'm happy to report. Early on, I think, as you mentioned, there were regular meetings scheduled between the county and city audit teams. So we used that space for auditors to share questions that they needed answered, either in interviews or survey instruments. And that worked really well because we would get to tag along with the county auditors on scheduled meetings that they had, or sometimes the county team would ask a question on behalf of our team. And that really helped respect the time of folks that are doing this very important work. We also shared our fieldwork plan, which is kind of our work plan for the way we're going to answer an audit objective. And that helped with avoiding duplication of effort between the 2 audit teams. And then later on, we shared our findings and our approach to reporting the results with each other, which helped surface conflicting or unreliable information. At this point, the weekly meetings have concluded, but our team is still sharing updates with the county audit team. and we'll let the county audit team know when we're ready to share our findings with the joint office and the county chair. And I think the coordination between audit teams has really made for more efficient use of both our time and the staff who are delivering these services time, as well as community members, and hopefully resulting in more accurate reports.
What's next?
Well, our team is nearing the end of field work. That's the phase where we analyze all the data that we've collected and we compare the evidence we've gathered to the criteria, which is typically coming from best practice or professional literature. At the end of field work, we'll develop findings for the audit, which again are going to address whether shelters are easy to access and accommodate diverse needs, whether people exiting shelters are finding safe housing, and then how racial equity is considered in the delivery. So our team is developing those findings, and I'll have a chance to review those this week, and then they'll be shared with the joint office for their initial response. And then our team will begin drafting their report. During that phase, and this is true of any audit shop that follows government auditing standards, that draft will undergo a very rigorous review process, by which an auditor that's not assigned to the team will fact check each statement, and then we share that draft with management for their feedback. Once that draft is complete, the team is going to ask management to respond to our audit recommendations in writing, and that's where they'll spell out for us the actions they plan to take to implement those recommendations. That response becomes part of the published report that we'll put on our website. And then for every year for 10 years, we monitor their progress to implement our recommendations. And with all audits, our hope is that the results will drive improvements in the delivery of services. As far as the next audit schedule, which was just released at the end of the fiscal year, it was the first schedule that my office has put out under my leadership. We're planning to conduct another audit of the joint office, this time focusing on the rapid rehousing program. Auditing homeless services is a priority that I share with community. During my campaign, I pledged to strengthen oversight of homeless services and to ensure that those services are meeting the needs of diverse groups. So when we were developing this year's audit schedule, something we heard from community organizations was that we should really be auditing the joint office frequently. So the rapid rehousing program came up when our team was scoping the shelter services audit. They were considering looking into entry into that program from the shelter system, but thought that it really deserved its own independent look because the program draws people from various circumstances, not just shelter. So auditing the rehousing program is really the natural next step for us to continue reviewing the city's response to our homelessness crisis. We're going to be starting that rapid rehousing audit at the end of 2023. And when we do that, we'll start by gathering some general information and then identifying criteria and developing our audit objectives.
One thing go ahead. I'm sorry. One thing I really appreciate about the fact that we both have audit authority of the joint office is it means we can look at so many pieces of it and really provide value to the public in that way. While you have a large office, your audit function isn't huge and neither is mine. And we're really, I think, have limited resources for all the things we're responsible for auditing. So I appreciate that joint authority because I don't have to try to figure out how I'm going to look at rapid rehousing because I know that your office is going to look at that. And so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a great point. We would love to look at everything within our jurisdiction, but we do have to make choices and prioritize our limited resources. So I'm grateful for the coordination with your office and kind of the openness to share ideas so that we're making the best use of our resources. What is next for your office?
So the data piece that we started the audit with that I talked about earlier, we're not concluded yet. We had our own communication issues, I would say, with the joint office about the data we needed and how we needed to assess it. And so we wanted to get the audit results we had out in as timely a manner as we could. And so we'll be wrapping up our work on the reliability of the joint office's data, hopefully have that done in the next couple of months and out to the public. My office is also conducting a contract monitoring audit that looks at 4 departments in the county, and one of them is the joint office. And that audit is in field work, which means they have objectives where they're really looking at timeliness of payments, effectiveness of monitoring, and we hope to wrap up field work on that audit, I believe, at the end of October, and then we'll go into that fact-checking process you described and into the reporting process. One thing that I know we wanted to talk about and we haven't gotten to yet is how stakeholders can engage in our work. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So there's a variety of ways. I imagine some of these are the same between our offices, but one way for folks to stay up to date on our audit work is to sign up to receive updates. That will put you on a list to receive our reports as soon as they're released, and that's accessible from our website. You can also, read and engage in the report itself, share them with colleagues and community members. We really want you to use our findings and recommendations to advance your own causes. One of the strengths of audit reports, because of our rigorous quality control and our planning procedures, is that they provide really objective and reliable information. And that means you can count on them to be complete and accurate sources of information. Sometimes audits can confirm what you might already know. Other times they'll dispute what you think you know, but they always identify opportunities for improvement. And engaging with the audit recommendations is really a way to hold government accountable and ensure that those changes are realized. My office is also planning to resume presentation of our audit results to City Council as they're completed. We're planning to do that on a quarterly basis. So the public can sign up to testify, or they can submit written testimony when those presentations are made. And then we also invite folks to suggest topics for audits or questions that they might have about government by contacting audit services or just reaching out to me directly. The quality of our work really depends on the input that we hear from community and practitioners, and the responsibility we have to hold government accountable is really one that's shared with you. Is there anything you would add in terms of ways that stakeholders can engage in your audit work?
I mean, I think you really captured a lot of it. I just encourage folks to look through the audit results, and if there are recommendations or pieces of information that really speak to you, to try to elevate that in your communities with your elected officials. Always happy to come out and talk to community groups about audits and ways that you can use them to help improve our community. We really want this to be information you can use to help make sure our government's accountable to each of us, and that it is equitable, and that we're building the kind of community we want to live in.